Oh boy, welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Majitog Pale's Wealth II. My name is Adam, and today I'm giving you my spoiler-free review of Dragons of Deceit by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. This is the first in the Dragonlance Destinies trilogy. We've been waiting over a decade for this, and now that it's finally here, I wanted to break up the review separate from what I normally do, because I want to give people time to read it themselves before I really go into the description of the story specifically. But equally, it's going to be a little bit challenging to talk about non-spoiler review of the book without being wildly vague. And that's kind of what I have to do for this one. So I hope you'll bear with me. I just finished this book about 2 hours ago, and I've just been sitting on it and thinking about it. And I really want to talk about details, but I can't, not in this episode, because you should read this, because it's good. I don't know if it's great, but it's good. So, for people joining live, 2,000 Mules, thanks for joining live. Frylock, always great to see you, man. Thanks for joining live. Silverwolf, how you doing? It's good to see you. Cozy Hade Pinchura? Hope I said that right. Thanks for tuning in. From Brazil, no less. That's awesome. I hope it feels better there than it does here. All right, you just started the novel Silverwolf? Awesome. Well, I hope you dig it. All of my fears, and let me start the spoiler review like this. Well, first, let me do this. I won't be spoiling the story at all, but if you don't want to know anything about this story, then just stop watching this right now, because I am going to talk about themes and ideas and concepts that are germane to the story, though I will be detail free. So if you literally want to go into the novel blank, then just don't watch this. Go read the novel, come back, watch this, and then watch the spoiler-filled review that I'm probably going to do tomorrow night. That's right. I'm going to give you a whole 24 hours to read the book. If you can't do it, don't watch tomorrow's episode. All right. That being said, I do want to just take a moment and thank the members of this channel and invite you to consider becoming a member if you're not already. John, thanks for joining live. Good to see you. Pat, what's up? Woo! Let's do this. You know, this is actually like a 4-finger pull of Bushmills. Okay. Sorry, I had to. It's a great day. It's a Dragonlance day because we got this book. So I went into this reading each of these 3 previews that were released, speculating with everyone else. And for the most part, all of our speculations were pretty much spot on. If you ever watched the Margaret Weis interview I did with her, she said straight up that the working title of this novel was Tasslehoff's Wife. And I was wildly speculating about a whole bunch of different possibilities, and I was wrong on every single one of them. Though it does make sense that that was a working title. Equally so, she told me that her and Tracy did not choose Dragons of Deceit, that it was actually the publisher that chose that name based on their previous books. And so I was afraid that Dragons of Deceit would have nothing to do with the story, even though it straight up does, as much as Tasslehoff's Wife has to do with the story. So it's confusing if you don't know the actual story yet, but understand that even though they didn't choose the Dragons of Deceit name, it does make sense. And even though the working title was really wild and obscure, it makes perfect sense in the course of the narrative. And so just, rest your mind on that. One other thing I was fearing was that Destina was going to be a sort of, a Rey Skywalker type character. And I could not be further from that thought in reality. She is completely flawed and as convoluted a character as I've always wanted every Dragonlance character to be. And that's the strength of Dragonlance over Star Wars, is that Star Wars has these sort of superhero type characters that may or may not have inner fears and problems that they have to work out. It doesn't really affect the story though. With Dragonlance characters, they are ripe with insecurities and fears and concerns and not living up to their own expectations equally to the world's expectations, but still being able to, in the end, deal with whatever life is throwing at them in this sort of framework of a war. And what we get with this story right off the bat is a lot of character development for Destina. And that was really, really important to me. I wanted to make sure that she as a character could stand on her own and be as fleshed out as in Dragons of Autumn Twilight, for example, any of those heroes were. And I have to say, she gets a lot more screen time than any of those characters ever did. And we get to really, really, really delve into her character and the characters around her character, namely her family. Because that's really where the bulk of the initial book one of this story, and it's broken up into 3 separate books, this novel, takes place. So it's really, really so much better than I was afraid it was going to be. And I don't even know why I was worried, because if you're thinking of Dragonlance in terms of the strengths of its writing, the team of Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, they really complement each other really, really well. And so any sort of fallback that you might have about these authors in their individual works, you know, together they sort of cover each other's bald spots, as it were. You know, they really make up for their own individual failures as writers together. And I think they did a really, really wonderful job with this story. Though I do have complaints, and I'll sort of address them vaguely as I get into this. But again, because I cannot really walk through the story in this spoiler-free review, because it's spoiler-free, I'm going to touch on some of the character ideas and concepts, only ones that have been revealed thus far, and some of the sort of Dragonlance nostalgic ideas that we as fans really wanted out of this when we heard the synopsis and when we were speculating on our own. Blue Beetle, thanks for joining live. Really appreciate you tuning in. Let's see. Yeah, Court, it's finally out. It is finally here. Thank you for tuning in. You're going to try the audiobook. That's the one I finished. I just had it on twice the speed and burned through it as I was working today. It was really kind of funny because I woke up as I was working out, I downloaded the audiobook, and then as I was halfway through the book, my shipment from Amazon came in, and so I hurried up and recorded a mail time episode that's going to be out tomorrow at 8 in the morning, and then published that, set this review up, and then finished the other half of the audiobook. So I'm going to be rereading this a few different times, and hopefully I can at least get through it one more time before I do my review tomorrow. There's a couple things about this that the cover that kind of bother me. First of all, it says classic Dragonlance. I understand why they did that. They did that because Wizards of the Coast is doing their own thing with Dragonlance that is separate from what Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman are writing about in this trilogy. And so those two are completely separate in their direction, in the storytelling, and everything. So rather than trying, as Dragonlance has tried to do in the past, of having the singular, the singular universe of Dragonlance with the gaming materials and the books, or they tried to as best as they could anyway, Wizards of the Coast is dropping that entirely. So the gaming stuff is one thing, and the novels are a completely different thing. So as long as you understand that going in, because we're going to be getting some Dragonlance modules and games at the end of this year, at least we're prepped not to be disappointed when they don't match up. So that's why they put the classic there. And then it also says a Dungeons and Dragons novel. The reason why that bothers me is that they're the ones that said they wanted to separate it from Dungeons and Dragons, the game, by putting the classic nomenclature in the logo itself. And then they're going to try to tack on and ride. They're going to try to get borrowed equity out of the Dragonlance brand, even though they're refusing to actually use it. Really makes me angry. They're trying to have the best of both worlds. We want to cash in on the brand equity of Dragonlance, but we don't want to adhere to anything that Dragonlance has done before. You need to make a choice, Wizards of the Coast. You're either a Dungeons and Dragons property or you're not, but you don't get both. Because us fans, we see you for what you are. You're just money grubbing, and you're not actually caring about the IP at all. That bugs me. That being said, I read it that fast, Chris, because I had the audiobook on 2-speed. So instead of it taking, I think it's like 14 hours or something like that, it took like 14 plus hours. It took 6 hours. So that's how I did it. Okay. Anyway, that's my interpretation of the Wizard of the Coast Dragonlance nonsense. Arrakis, good to see you. Thanks for joining live. And by the way, thanks for tuning in, Chris. Always good to see you. Hey, your animals are much more important than this stupid show. 100%. So take your time, deal with life. When you have a chance, join us. Okay, so let's dive into some of these themes and some of these characters. And again, I'm not going to be spoiling anything, and I want to keep saying that because there's reasons why I'm leaving stuff out. And there's a very tight line I have to sort of navigate, because if I say anything about the story, it's going to spoil the story. And even though we think we knew details, and we were right about a lot of the details, there's so much more involved that the last third, the book 3 of this novel, really goes in a direction that I didn't expect, but I was pretty excited about. Oh, it wasn't your animal. All right, we'll screw that dog then. Okay, so Destina Rosethorn, she's Solamnic, she's a human. She's actually half Solamnic, half Ergothian. Her mom's Ergothian, her dad's Solamnic. They do a lot of character development with her and her parents and the events of the world around it. And I really loved spending a lot of time with Destina before it like got into the story proper. Because not only are they trying to break in a new character for fans who have arguably read up to or over 100 of the 200 plus books that are out, the authors have to do a lot of groundwork to get us to care. And I think they did more than enough, but not so much that I felt like she overstayed her welcome. Actually, there's the pivotal decision that is on the Dust Jacket synopsis, and it's been out there that, the point of this novel, or this trilogy, arguably, is her trying to save her dad from his fate, right? Like, he died in the War of the Lance. I'm not spoiling anything because it's been out, but he died in the War of the Lance, and she wants to go back to stop that from happening. There's 2 times where she comes to this thought in order to do this. The first time, it made perfect sense in the context of what was going on, but she made the very adult decision to sort of set that aside and say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And then later on, something else happens, a series of events happens where she says, you know what, I have to go back and do it this time. And that didn't make any sense to me. You could have just X'd out the first decision where she just said, I'm not going to, do or try anything like that for obvious reasons, but they kept it in there. And so it creates this really wishy-washy justification for the story to exist. If you just left out the first one, the second one makes perfect sense. If you have them both, the second one makes infinitely less sense. And it's not what, the justification is not what seems like it should be. It's not on the nose, which makes it even more frustrating as a reader to then see her making this choice after she's already rejected it once, and there have been examples provided for why that would be a bad idea. But she does it anyway. So, the story must go on, and I don't know why they included it or made those decisions, but they did. Albat Witch, good to see you. Thanks for joining live. Using time MacGuffin devices. There are 2 MacGuffins. And yes, the device of time journeying is the first one, and that's the one on the back of the jacket. The Grey Gem of Gargath was alluded in the previews, and so we know that was the other artifact. So that's no surprise that that's the other one, the other MacGuffin that she has to sort of chase down. And let's go to that really quick, because those 2 artifacts, and there's infinitely more than that in this novel, which I think is great, but those 2 artifacts that we already knew about because they'd spoiled it already, it doesn't make sense, the explanations for why they are where they are. We thought we knew where the device of time journeying was at the end of Dragons of Summer Flame, and then they wrote War of Souls. And then it was sort of like hands in the air. It never explained what happened to the device of time journeying after Tasslehoff went back to get crushed by chaos in the Chaos War at the end of it. He sacrificed himself for everyone. And so when we find out in this story where the device of time journeying is, it makes no sense. How the hell did it get there? Why would it ever have been there in the first place? And maybe it's just me misremembering, which is entirely possible, but I don't remember it being where it ended up. Equally so, the Grey Gem of Garagath should be on the Isle of Gargath, not where it is in the book. It doesn't make sense that it's where it is in the book. But then we also have to remember, as everything with Dragonlance, they just renege storylines and forget stuff and twist stuff around and change things up at a whim because it's convenient for the story they're telling. And so as long as we go in with that understanding that Dragonlance has historically overwritten existing narratives in order to fit the narrative that's currently being told, then, you just sort of shake it off and say, well, okay, whatever. They're not supposed to be where they are, but they're there because you want them to be there. Fine, whatever. When you start to think about logic too much, you just I get angry, because it doesn't seem like it would be difficult to find out where they are. There's information online. There are fans that are willing to tell you where they are and what's going on. So anyway, Goldman, thanks for joining live. It's great to see you. Okay, so that kind of bugged me, but again, there's a tradition of that in Dragonlance, so I can't really get too mad. Tasslehoff Burrfoot, I'm going to go over the characters on the cover because we know that they exist, and anything that's not been revealed yet, I'm not going to talk about. So Tasslehoff Burrfoot is typical Tasslehoff. There's nothing different about him. This is a time that's after. This is what kind of so Margaret Weis did say that it was after the Blue Ladies' War in my interview. And then we know that it's obviously before the Summer of Chaos because Tasslehoff, is around and stuff. So, in one of the story, one of the releases, the previews, the last preview was about Tasslehoff meeting this new character. And him being at the end of the last home as some of the children are being born to Karaman and Tika. And so, we get to see Tasslehoff in his traditional wit, silliness, goofiness, stupidity. And there's some conventions that happen that I don't think are logical for Tasslehoff based on what we know about kender, traditions of kender. But again, it's the authors extrapolating on what they had originally wrote about kender and disregarding everything that other authors have written about kender. And so we really, really need to focus that this was written from a position of going back to first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons materials and the Legends and Chronicles novels only. This does not address stuff that comes after it. Because again, it contradicts stuff that's in like Second Generation and Summer of Chaos. So, or Dragons of Summer Flame, I believe is the novel name. So, when we go into that, you just have to understand that Tasslehoff is a little bit different, but he's pretty much the exact same character, but there's some choices that are made that don't make a lot of sense. And there's this fine line that they have to sort of straddle between Tasslehoff just being a freaking idiot and Tasslehoff just sort of following his kender traditions. But then they all, there's this sort of tertiary problem here because they're saying that Tasslehoff is not like any other kender, meaning he deviates from the norm, but then they justify some of his behaviors as because he's a kender. So either he follows kender traditions or he doesn't. But again, they're straddling that reality of saying, well, he's not really a normal kender, but when we need him to be a normal kender, he is. Okay, well, again, it's for the narrative, so you got to just sort of like shrug your shoulders and move forward, right? Wolfstone, that's the Dergar dwarf that's standing there right next to Destina and the dragon. He's not in it as much as I thought he would be. And he's really not an important part of it. He has a pivotal part in the story, but as far as like the longevity and where the story leads to and everything, he has a passing role. And so I was really surprised that he made a cover art choice. It didn't really make that much sense to me. But he is in the entire, almost the entirety of book 2 of the novel. So the second act, ostensibly. So, whatever. If he's going to be in it, he's going to be in it. I don't know why he's on the cover. Probably because they wanted diversity. They wanted to show another race. And so there he is. The character of Wolfstone is fine. He does what I've always argued about whenever dealing with playing characters in Dragonlance, because again, when we're talking about Dragonlance in general, we clump the races together, right? So all dwarves are like this. All Sylvanisty elves are like that. All Quilinisty elves are like that. And so, or like Dergar or Thior, the different classes of dwarves are all the same in their class. And what Wolfstone does is say, look, no, we're all individuals, We may be of this ethnicity within the race, but we're still individuals. Like, as much as you're going to have the Derek Crown Guards in Solamnic Knights that are supposed to be these holy, righteous defenders of good and justice and whatever, Derek's a douche. So if you're going to have, Knights of Solamnia that are just straight up douches, then equally you're going to have other ethnicities in races that are going to be douches, individuals within those ethnicities. So he really presses the point home that not all Quilinisty elves are the same. Not all Dergar dwarves are the same. We're individuals that are a part of a greater category. But that's as far as it goes. So you can't just lump us in as all being good or bad. I really like that in Dragonlance because it's needed. First of all, it's just like a no shit type thing. But when we're always talking about fantasy races, we always lump them together with shared traits rather than thinking of them as individual characters, player or non-player. So, yeah, he totally is, man. Benjamin, thanks for joining live. Good to see you. GV Zosiris, thanks for joining live. Good to see you. So, Wolfstone did that for me. He really hammered home the idea that there are individuals within the races. Now, that dragon is a copper dragon behind them. I don't think they've released his name in any of the promo materials, but it's not a spoiler to give the name. The name is Saber. It's a copper dragon, and he's a traditional copper dragon. They like pretty things. They like to talk people's ears off, and they're good dragons. Doesn't play a huge role, but is necessary as a transport device. Really, that's what it comes down to, which is kind of silly, but whatever. Okay, so another part of this a theme here is the historical change that's being made. Not only are they making changes in where objects are supposed to be in this time, they're making changes because it deals with time change, right? It deals with a device of time journeying. So assuming she gets a hold of what she's supposed to be getting a hold of, and assuming she travels, well, then the entire series, the whole Destinies trilogy, is about her making a mistake and then correcting the mistake, right? So this being the first act of that greater trilogy, I can't really say much more, but we do see a change in Dragonlance history. And what it initially made me think was, I didn't think they were going to go there with it. I was surprised with where they went. And it's not as globally catastrophic as like the Fifth Age, which I'm very happy for. It alludes to possibilities of being really bad, but at the point of this book, of this story, it's not as catastrophic as some of us feared. It's certainly not a reboot by any means of Dragonlance. And that's not what they went in with the intention of doing either. What it does make me question, however, is why they wrote this story. Why did they feel compelled to write this story? Because that's not answered in this first novel. The reason it exists. And I would think that that would be important to the authors to really hammer home. This is why we're telling the story, so here's the story. We didn't get any of that, at least not from my reading of it. And so I was a little bit surprised that, I got to the end of the novel and I'm sitting here thinking about it going, they said that this was a story that they really wanted to tell and they were excited to tell. Why? Like, give me a reason. It's fun. I enjoyed the story, but I don't know why it would need to be told. We already have similar characters like Destina, and we have similar world situations that they go through in this novel. So I don't understand how this is any different than anything else, or why it's necessary over what we've already had. I'm glad we have it. I want that to be clear. But the justification for money, well, yeah. Yeah, definitely. John, good to see you, man. So I was a little bit, I don't know, another of the what the hell sort of checklist that I have of why. As far as like familiar characters, we know the era that we're going back in. We know we've already had the preview of seeing Karaman, Tika, Tasslehoff. We see the Thane under the mountain. We see Wolfstone, though he's not a familiar character. There are so many more familiar characters in this than I expected there to be. So many more. It was a veritable cornucopia of our beloved characters in more or less interesting situations or gravity of the story, but they were there. And I was so incredibly pleased to see that we really, really got to revisit some of our favorite people in this wonderful world of Dragonlance, And that's the other thing with history, is that we go to eras where they've had stories that have gone to these places before. In most cases, one of them caught me completely off guard. And I did not think they were going to end up where they ended up. And it made me sort of like chomping at the bit going, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? Where are they going to go with this now? And as much as the characters are trying to wrap their brains around what's happening and where they are and why this X happened, they do a really good job of explaining the complexity and justification and causation of time travel. Like, they spend enough time explaining situations that I feel I understand time travel in this universe of Dragonlance. And I haven't read all of the Legends of the Twins source book that came out that was all about time travel. And so maybe it's rehashing that information. But for me, as someone who's primarily read the books and played the role-playing games, but not really used time travel as a device in the role-playing games, I never really thought of it in the depth and detail that they presented it. And I really appreciated that because it helps explain the plot so much better. And it was needed. I mean, just to be honest. Let's see. They'll end up changing the timeline back to the one where Tasslehoff witnessed uniting the Elven nations. No, that is not suggested. That is not hinted at all. So don't go into thinking of that. This is not a reboot. Let's see. You're curious what you would need to read before this. Read the Chronicles and Legends. That's really all you need. Chronicles and Legends. If you want to read the Lost Chronicles, then by all means, but it's not really necessary. Okay, so not only familiar characters, but classic locations. We know there's a scene in Thorbardin. We know there's a scene in Solace. We know it deals initially with the timeline of the War of the Lance, and so there's those familiar locations that are played with too. But again, they go to places I did not anticipate them going to, and it made me nervous as a fan. Like, it would be so easy to go to these places and screw up our love of those places or characters or events based on how this novel could interact with it. But it doesn't. And in such a wonderful way that we get to see these situations, that it sort of leads me into my next talking point of nostalgia. What I got from this novel more than anything else was nostalgia for Dragonlance. This is not me reading through War of the Souls or the Fifth Age novels by Jean Rabe or the Dark Disciple trilogy by Margaret Weis or any of the other novels that are out, and where I'm feeling like, oh, this is a continuation of Dragonlance. No. This is a return to the original Dragonlance era. And that's important because it explains why we see so many familiar characters. And I started thinking about this sort of halfway through the novel. Is this nostalgia for nostalgia's sake? I'm going to go back to what the author said about how this is a story that they needed to tell. Is it just for nostalgia? Because they didn't give me a reason, the only reason I can think of is nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. And hopefully in the second novel, that's going to be clarified and it's really going to be, pressed into their, this is why it needed to be told. But as far as the first novel is concerned, I just felt like I was just revisiting old friends. The writing style is just familiar. This is what we know, Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, and love. That's why we love this saga, is because of their writing. It felt comforting and warm to return to it. But again, I never at any time thought the world is going to change. Like this is a cataclysmic event of any proportion at all. This just felt like, oh, we're going to tell a story in this, a story that, again, is not entirely original. Certainly elements of it have already been told in different characters' stories. It feels really familiar because of that, because we've already heard these stories, because we're revisiting an era that we know everything about. And so it just, it did sort of feel cheap in the fact that it is just nostalgia food for your brain, an easy dopamine hit, as it were. Okay, so what else here? What do we got? The intimacy of the story, I think, is something that was really wonderful, especially in that first book, that first third of this story. It felt really, really intimate in a really wonderful way. And the third book feels intimate in a completely different way. But it doesn't, again, it's not the heroes going to the end of the last home and then Fizban comes and tells them to go on this larger journey where they end up as the heroes of the Lance. It's like this world-shattering party of heroes that changes fate of everything. That doesn't feel this scope. This book doesn't. This book feels the scope of this is an individual story in an existing world that we already know about, and it's her just sort of navigating the waters that we're already familiar with. We already know it's warm. We've dipped our toe in it. So it's us sitting in a hot tub, and it's just a new person hops in. And you're just like, hey, what's your story? Because I don't know. Is that what you do in hot tub, public hot tubs? Do people do that? Let's see. I'm trying to look at my notes. I think I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Oh, so official pronunciations. Tracy Hickman on his YouTube channel announced that the publisher reached out to him when they were getting ready to do the audiobook and said, we need you to give us official pronunciations of this list of Dragonlance specific vernacular terms, And so I say Dragonlance words one way. You guys say it a different way because I've heard so much shit about how I say it from you. Everyone seems to say these words slightly different, but now we have official, documented, the publisher reached out to Tracy to get his pronunciations for each and every one of these words, and this is them reciting his official pronunciation. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I didn't know if that had happened with any of the other audiobooks. How involved the original creator was with the pronunciation of all of the different locations and gods and characters and everything. For example, Majir is not Majir. It's Majara. And it's not Majare as in the god, how the god's pronunciation. It's like, I'm going off of memory here, but I think it was like Majara or something like that. It just felt odd and weird because I've said Majir for my entire life, So to hear it that way, that's very close to the way they pronounced the god's name originally, but not exactly that way, it threw me off. You too, Benjamin? Yeah. And so, they say stuff like Sylvanesti instead of Sylvanesti. I think it rolls off the tongue better as Sylvanesti rather than Sylvanesti, because then you're just like, nest. It feels weird to me. And then it's stuff like the mountain ranges where I'll say like let me think of the name. Thorbardin is just south of the I can't remember the name mountain range that it's south of. Anyway, they said that dramatically different than I've ever said it. So I was a little bit pulled out initially of, listening to someone else say all these words a different way. And I had to do the mental math of, oh, that's what they meant, rather than just listening and absorbing. Carolize. Yeah. So I say Carolize Mountains because that in my mind makes sense. They say Careless Mountains. That is just a weird way of pronouncing it to me, but it's official, I guess. So that's how it's said. So anyway, if you really want to be a stickler about pronunciations, and I know a lot of you are because I've gotten the brunt end of that, listen to this audiobook and you will get the exact pronunciation from Tracy Hickman for the entire universe of words, including character names, not just the Magir's last name, but there's a lot of other ones in there too. So, Calkist Mountains was like, yeah, I can't remember, but they do go through different pronunciations for it all. So I've been wrong, and I know I say things differently, but I've been wrong about like every single pronunciation I've ever given. And I know it pisses people off and they don't watch these videos because of that specifically. They've told me that. But I'm still going to say it how I've always said it. So I'm not an official channel. I'm a fan. So deal with it. I understand it's officially pronounced one way, but regionally around the world, people say words differently. So that's my excuse. Let's see. And those are like the main bullet points that I got from this novel. Again, as far as like a rating is concerned, out of 5 dragon orbs, what else? Out of 5 dragon orbs, I would give this 4.5 dragon orbs, because there are things about it that made me go, that was a weird decision. Why did they do that? Why is this happening? Where the hell are they going? It ends on a straight up cliffhanger, which infuriates me. It's great because that's what they want you to want to read the next novel, but it's a straight up cliffhanger. And it made me angry because I was like, no, we don't even know when the next book's going to be out. like it's not even at the publisher yet. We just know that they finished writing it. So how long do I have to wait to find out what happened at this cliffhanger moment? Drives me nuts. Hopefully it's next year, but who knows? It could be in 2 years. It could be in 10 years. It could be never. We just don't know. Drives me nuts. So there's that. So it is a fun story. I was invested the whole time because I love Dragonlance. If you're not really into Dragonlance, I could see the first half of the book sort of being not as interesting for people. The second half of the book, and especially the third act, I think if you're a Dragonlance fan, you're going to just be chomping at the bit, burning through it, because that's where it really picks up steam and you get some really good meaty stuff. So much so that you'll get angry when you finish it because of that stupid cliffhanger. There's a video of the correct pronunciations. Oh, that's cool. Hey, Mr. 10, thanks for joining live, by the way. Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's I'm gonna have to check that out. What else? My favorite parts in the book was definitely in the third act, and it's stuff that I cannot even talk about without spoiling the story. But just know that when I do the spoiler review, I'll extrapolate on that a little bit more. But it was the third act that was my favorite. My least favorite part of the book is the first act with the decision to go after the time travel device. It made less sense to me than I thought it would have, because I really thought I knew why she was going to do it. And it's not the obvious reason. And so it just makes no sense to me at all. Like, what? I understand you have to do it for the story, but that was a stupid fucking reason. Or sorry, that was a stupid reason to do it. What are you going to do, right? So that's a half a dragon orb rating from me, because of the sort of the logic isn't 100% there for me, but other people may enjoy it. They may buy it. And I would be very interested in hearing if you guys, when you guys read this, if if you bought it, you were just like, oh yeah, no, that made perfect sense to me. Definitely. One thing that I do want to know now, after this story is over, is I want a book about Destina's mom. Destina's mom is a badass. She is the best part of the entire first third of this book. She's amazing. I love this woman. I want to know more about her history. I want to know what happens to her after she sort of exits stage left in the story. I need more of Destina's mom in my life. 100%. She's a great character. I could give that dragon. I don't see any reason why he's not even in it. It's just the weirdest thing to be like, hey, we're going to throw a dragon in it because it's dragons of deceit. So we have to have a dragon. They're like, what are we going to have the dragon do? Well, dragons fly. So let's just have it be the Tesla for Destina. So the dragon is Destina's Tesla. That's it. It's a fancy car. That's it. That's it. Drives me nuts. It's like, you could do so much more with dragons. So much more. And you just choose not to. All right. Even in the context of the story, they could have done more with the dragon. But they chose not to. Okay, what are you going to do? There was a fun little battle scene in it. I thought it was really great. I'm not going to say the context around it, even though it's not really a spoiler. But we get to see a really interesting little conflict of sorts. I want to talk about this more because the spoiler review is probably going to be like a 5-hour discussion of me just going off. But I got to be honest, as soon as I finish this, aside from the cliffhanger being really, really great, I really enjoyed this story, and not just for the nostalgia reasons, though that's probably what is going to be pumping into everyone initially anyway. I enjoyed it because it's a return to form of Dragonlance that we haven't seen in a very long time. No matter how you feel about the 5th Age and on, that's where Dragonlance has been for the majority of its existence, is the 5th Age and on. And like at this point, we're so used to that version of Dragonlance, going back to this really clean and pure version of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons era of Dragonlance. It felt really good. And, just in the best possible ways. And so I really, really appreciated that. I enjoy the 5th Age and after, but, that original 4th Age of Dragonlance was just so wonderful. And to go back was very much going home, Maybe too much, but still good stuff. Douglas Niles, he would be a great one to write that story. Yeah, James, that's a good choice. Okay. Anyway, have you guys read this yet? Are you partway in it? Are you explaining it? Does it all make logical sense to you as you're reading it? Let me know in the chats. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the live discussion. I know I'm being really vague and ranty and stuff, but I can't really say anything without spoiling it straight up. So I really want you guys to go out and read this because it's worth it. All of the fears that I heard from people that they were afraid was going to happen or they were afraid could happen did not. And so, and there's some things where people were disappointed because they heard the author say that wasn't going to happen or this person wasn't going to be in it, but they are. And it did. So I can't, even that's saying too much. This is a very pleasant surprise and I'm very happy I read it and I own it. Because I'm going to be revisiting it a few times this year, for sure. It's that good to me. So, hope you guys have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining in. That's my spoiler-free review of Dragons of Deceit by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. Let me know if once you read it, what you think. Since you're not joining me live after the fact, you can always leave a comment below, or you can always email me at info@dlsaga.com. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga, and it is back, baby, in a big way. Thank you for joining me. My name is Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar. I should have had a graphic for the rating of Dragonlance. That'd be fun.